Hi, Dr. Martin. Yeah, we're gonna go ahead and get started. I feel like I could talk to you, though I'm not talking to you, but yeah, let me go ahead and share all my screens. Okay, so I'm gonna be walking through the relationship. So talking about the relationship between philosophical teaching beliefs and just world beliefs among white counselor educators. And I'm going to be talking about the four things that you wanted us to talk about, which was methodological approach and rationale, ethical and political considerations, methods and research design, and then procedures, and then kind of including all of this into it. So starting off, I have a literature framing. So I tried to include a little bit about what you spoke about kind of in the paragraph before you had the what to include. So I came up with this general paragraph. Constructing a teaching philosophy is part of the beginning counselor educator's developmental and training process. It continues beyond the doctoral level by becoming required to obtain and maintain a tenure track and tenured faculty positions within academia. Philosophy statements intend to focus less on the counselor educators and more on intentionally designing supportive learning experiences for counselors in training to obtain knowledge and skills. However, previous research tells us that counselor educators, primarily white counselor educators, continue to uphold a white savior's gaze of social justice and advocacy, which in turn fosters oppression and disconnection to learning for students of color, and often lack of sense of self-reflexivity and positionality when it comes to their teaching philosophies. But this relationship has yet to be explored. By developing an empirical understanding of these relationships, using a correlative investigative model and a linear regression model to analyze the educational belief scale and the global belief scale in just world, we can better inform white counselor educators about their practices related to preparation for social justice and advocacy within a pedagogical framework. So trying to encompass everything within there, acknowledging that my study's methodology is a correlative investigation model that's going to be used. This model is one of the most applied models in the related literature when it comes to this topic. Correlative investigation model is used to determine the correlation between different variables in educational research and aims to identify the existence or level of coordination change between two or more variables. And so we'll have two variables, which is going to be philosophy of education and pedagogy, and then the just world beliefs, our global beliefs in a just world. So overview of methodology, kind of grounding us back in the purpose. So it's an exploratory study to compare, as I just said, educational beliefs and just world beliefs for white counselor educators using a linear regression model. Just a reminder of the four research questions, which I'll touch on again when we get to the methods a little bit more. Talking about ethical and political considerations. So I took your advice, Dr. Martin, and changed up the first person narrative. So I made that for my ethicals. And then I also acknowledged that there's no more risk to what a participant could be expected to experience in an average day. That was something that you put in my memos, which I found really helpful. And just thank you. Like, sorry, I know we talked about like not taking it too much and like you didn't bring me down at all. I'm really like asking myself why and like sitting with it and fussing and fighting with it, which I love. So everything's great and golden. I love your feedback. Thank you so much. So took your feedback for that ethics. I have the reflexivity statement listed below, which just acknowledges kind of more who I am in this research and things that authors should take into consideration if they're going to replicate it or even read it. Both should be considered. The political, I acknowledge educational reform. This could, stipulate what we do in the classroom, especially for majority of white counselor educators, because as I talked about in the last conceptual framework, majority are white, up to 70 to 80% probably are white. So educational reform, social justice in the classroom, what happens for our students, especially students of color. And then policy implications, it could change politically what is done in education, especially as we notice that there's a lot of policies in place in public universities that are trying to get rid of DEI, and this would show this kind of line of research would help to support that. And then I talk about in essence, studying white counselor educators from a political standpoint involves examining how their racial identities intersect with their professional roles, which I think is super important. Moving into data sourcing. So I took these straight from the memo. So it's just talking about the data source. So where I'm getting the data is going to be educational belief scale, and then the advocacy belief scale. And then in the notes section, I just kind of put in how they tie back into the research question. So research question 1 is about white counselor educators' philosophy of educational beliefs. So that will be answered with that first scale. And then the second one is about global beliefs, will be answered with that scale. And then is there a correlation between the two? You'll see the EBS and GBWS. And then the fourth question looks at each of the 5 subscales, which look at the different philosophies of pedagogy in higher education that we use in counseling. And so it looks at each of those individually compared with the global beliefs of a just world scale. So that's how the scales or the data sources are related to the research questions. I think that's the only thing I have in notes. Talk a little bit about collection methods, research setting and selection. So participants will be white educator teaching at a university across the United States. As long as they're white and teaching at a counseling university across the United States, I don't care if they're adjunct, I don't care if they're tenure track or tenured, or if they're counseling psychology. I have that in my demographic to kind of identify, or not to kind of identify, to identify those specifics, but for the main research goal, I'm not particular about any of that. They're going to be recruited during the fall of this year using AssessNet, which is the Counselor Education and Supervision Network. It's a listserv, it's a professional network. Eligibility criteria is 18 or up. Identifying as being white or European descent, and self-identifying as a tenure track counselor educator or faculty educator who has taught the counseling program. Again, doesn't matter, master's students, doctoral students. Participants will be provided with an electronic consent and confirmation of eligibility via Qualtrics, which is a web-based survey tool, and data that will be collected anonymously. So there will be no information that I collect as a researcher. Study procedures hopefully will be approved by Institutional Review Board within the southern eastern United States. I kind of tried writing this as if I'm going to write it for the IRB, so that was my goal with that. I'm rushing because I don't want to go overtime. And then data analysis methods. This was taken from my analysis that I did in the memo. You did give me any feedback on that, which was thankful. And then participant sample strategies. I didn't add anything to this because you said that you liked it, so I just left it. But I did add the notes that you had when you were referring to what should be on this, which was access, role, reciprocity, trust and rapport. So trust and rapport, hopefully, or let me go back. Access is CESNET, which is that professional networking, and then also networking. I've met a lot of white counselor educators. My PI for this will also be a white counselor educator. So a lot of networking has been done, and emails will be sent out as well. So I'll be able to access a lot of white counselor educators for my 89 participants, which I'm not too worried about at all. Again, 70% of us, there's over 4,000 that's been recorded. So there's a lot of us out there. Role anonymous participants, if that's going to be their role, I'm going to be the surveyor. So they're sending me the survey. There's no interaction between us. Reciprocity, I've created, they're not getting paid for this, but I did create a Google Doc that's going to be shared at the very end. So when they finish the survey, they'll get a living resource document. And so this document will continually be updated every month with new resources and links and guides. One around advocacy and one section around like philosophical teaching philosophies. So the two things that I'm trying to look at, two constructs I'm trying to look at, they're going to be resources that are like talking about teaching philosophy, and then advocacy. And so trust and rapport, updating that living document every month, like I say I'm going to do. They copy the link and then they just, once they activate it, they'll have access to it. They can't do anything with it other than like download whatever is in there. But it's to maintain trust with them that this is something that they should do. I want to update it each month. I'm also looking at a grant that hopefully I can pay counselor educators of color. I can pay them money to record videos about teaching and about advocacy, and then I can upload those to the document. And in that case, I'll send another acknowledgement out that this is done, and they'll have access to it too. They'll also have a consent form, and just me being responsive to any emails are all things that I should be considering when I'm looking at these. Finally, trustworthy and credibility. You said I was good to just put it in here, so I did. I didn't cite anything because I'm hopefully everything I've cited so far is meeting all of those pieces of validity and quality and trustworthiness and credibility. So speaking of QVTC, I wanted to include my diagram, my visual, because I thought it was important, acknowledging that QBTC should be looked at all of these pinpoints. So we have, when I'm thinking about white identity development and researcher myself and my participants, I should be considering QBTC here, all these points. So I've added in these green areas to kind of acknowledge that this QBTC branches out and should be thought about at various points. Different aspects of QVTC might need to be thought of at these points, but all four should be considered before I even get to writing up the description and the data page. Lastly, I have the references, and then I wanted to share that hopefully this is switching over so you can see, I use Zotero as I have all my documents in that I've used. And then I have an Excel spreadsheet for my bibliographic library. So I have my APA citations. I have an in-text citation because I find that that's helpful for me. I have my comments listed here about kind of like what I thought it would be useful for. And then I have methodologies that they use. Is a quant qual? Is it a book that I would want to like go back to for more like references or like guidance on methodology? I guess I should put that there, sorry. And then gaps. What are the gaps that I noticed from there? Trying to keep it short and simple to the point. I've done these before and I've tried to put more information and it just confuses me. So I tend to like this a little bit more. The ones that are red are like a PDF of like the American Counseling Association goodness gracious, I'm sorry, competencies. And then there's again accreditation, CACREP accreditation competencies and what we should be doing, and then code of ethics. So there's no real methodology or gaps, but those are things that I found my ethics in, and those are things that I found a lot of ground a lot of my methodologies and such in. Hopefully that helps. Hopefully that was everything. Thanks so much for everything this semester.